Good morning. Rich. Everything has on the curve, not picked up, you know.
FaceTime, she's always felt better, you know, FaceTime, but she was so good at clothes. The whole thing. I got that was so good. Always FaceTime. A lot of work. Well, I wouldn't do it. Should be going for a training. I'm gonna be Jimmy, thank you. And what? Yeah, she's out. Right now. Okay.
I'm following you.
All right, let's go and get started now that John's here. What are the next you'll be telling me Santa's not real? All right, let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer, and then we're going to be kind of into Mark 4, going into Mark 5. And we've got several things that we'll look at in Mark 5. I did have some slides, but I can't seem to get the Apple box to connect to the TVs, and so, oh well, who cares, right? Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Clay, I made eye contact with you, so you say a word of prayer.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today, for all the blessings. Thank you for the time that you gave us this morning to come together, come out of the world and be renewed, and be energized by one another and by your word. And thank you for the opportunity to study more about your word, and to sing songs of praise to you, and pray, and to learn more about you. Ask you to be with Brian and all the other teachers this hour. Help them to teach the things that they prepared in a way that's easy for us to understand, and help us to apply those things to our lives and apply them to the lives of those around us. In your son's name, amen.
Amen. All right, so open up your Bibles to Mark chapter 4, end of Mark 4. And there are 4 stories. I'll go ahead and just write a little bit on the board. What color do I want today? Yeah, I like that. Now, I'm going to write down the 4 stories that we're going to take a look at. Hopefully get through it today, because there's kind of a big picture lesson that I think that we can take away from this. Mark, as well as I think Matthew in particular, Matthew and Mark tend to take the stories of Jesus and group them together kind of thematically, whereas Luke, in Luke chapter 1, Luke says he goes chronologically. He says, I've set these out in consecutive order. Luke is the only one who explicitly says he's going to do a chronological telling of the events of Jesus' life. But Matthew and Mark seem to take stories that are related to each other and then group them together. Even if they're not chronological, they're thematic. And I think this is an example where we have maybe a bunch of different events that might not have happened like right one after the other, but there are a bunch of events that are related to each other and have a lot of similarities to each other that Mark kind of clumps together here to try and drive home like a bigger lesson. So I think that's what's going on here. So there's 4 stories that we're going to take a look at. And it's, briefly, we'll take a look at the end of Mark 4. And that's Mark 4, 35 through 41, which we looked at on Wednesday. But that's the calming of the storm. And then we'll get into Mark 5. And in Mark 5, 1 through 19, that's the story of the man with the demons, or 2, depending on which gospel you're looking at. There were 2, but some have only mentioned the 1. But it's the man with the legion of demons, and kind of the events around that. And then we'll take a look at Mark 5, 25 through, I think it's 34. And that's the healing of the woman with the hemorrhage. And then in Mark chapter 5, that story of the woman with the hemorrhage is in the middle of kind of the beginning and the end of another story where there's a young life that gets restored. And let's take a look at that one too. That's 21 through 24. And then the end of that one comes in Mark chapter 5, 35 through 43. Okay? Now, all of these stories have a few things to do with each other. When you look at calming the storm, the legion of demons, you look at the healing of the hemorrhage, and you look at the raising of the young life, they all have a few things in common. The first thing that they all have in common, and you just kind of look at Mark 4 and 5, and I like to color code so that I can see things really quickly and easily, right? So I can just scan the page. Every single story, every single one of these stories, first of all, and if it's all familiar, I did preach this lesson back in August. This is actually a sermon I did back in August, but you might not have been here, summer vacation. It was a 9 o'clock lesson. I don't know if everybody was here. So if it sounds familiar, it is. You're not crazy. If it doesn't sound familiar, then new material. There you go. To you. All of these stories have a few things in common. First, somebody in the story, or some multiple somebodies, are facing a power that is beyond their control. Okay, it's the power of the weather. So in each of these stories, you've got the weather. Can't control the weather. Demons, physical ailments, and death itself. Right? Those are things we just ultimately can't control. I can take medicine. I can check a weather app and maybe avoid weather. I can do everything I can and take a bunch of vitamins and exercise and maybe prevent death for a while. But in all of these things, somebody is facing a problem that is far beyond their control. They can't fix it. They can't help it. In each of these stories, there's also fear. Fear plays a part in each of these stories. If you like to color code or underline, look at Mark 4, verse 41. And they became very much afraid. Okay? Why were they afraid? Well, because they just saw Jesus calming the storm. And of course, they were afraid of the storm from the beginning, but it says they were very much afraid. The people, the townsfolk who come out to see the man with the legion of demons, exercised and in his right mind. It says in Mark 5, verse 15, that the townspeople became frightened. Right? They were very frightened. They saw a man who had demons, no demons anymore, and they became frightened. The woman with the hemorrhage, it says in verse 33, but the woman fearing and trembling. She was afraid. She was fearing and trembling because, she thought maybe she was in trouble with Jesus because she touched his garment, was healed, and now she's in the middle of a great big crowd and Jesus is confronting her, so it's no surprise that she's fearing and trembling. Jesus also in verse 36, when he goes to the home of the synagogue official Jairus to go bring his daughter back to life, he tells them in verse 36, but overhearing what was being spoken, said to Jairus, the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer." So in all four of these stories, fear is specifically mentioned. Somebody is afraid in all of these stories. In all of these stories, there's imploring or reaching out, okay? People are asking for something. They're asking Jesus, "Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing?" In Mark 4, verse 38. What are they asking for? Well, something. Do something. At least help us bail water at the very least. Maybe do something. In Mark chapter 5, it says in verse 12 that the demons entreated him, saying, "At least send us into the swine and not into the abyss." And so the demons are entreating him. And then it says later on in verse 17 that the townsfolk were entreating him to go away. And then it says in verse 18 that the formerly demon-possessed man was entreating him that he might go with him in his ministry. So they're entreating him. In verse 23, it says that Jairus entreated him earnestly. And one would assume the woman with the hemorrhage entreated at least silently. The fact that she went to Jesus and touched his garment was at least a silent entreating of something, healing. So in all of these stories, someone is facing something that's far beyond their control. Their immediate response is fear, and they're asking Jesus to do something in all of these stories. In all of these stories, other solutions have been tried and failed. The disciples try to bail water, and it doesn't work. I mean, I don't know exactly what the man with the demons might have been doing, but, I mean, he's been with those demons for a long time, and surely in his moments of clarity and rightness of mind, he would have tried something. The woman with the hemorrhage says, "Well, I've tried it. I've tried doctors. I mean, I've been bled dry." Now, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, financially, she's been bled dry by doctors and medicines that don't work. And there's Jairus, his little girl's dying, if not dead, and what else is he going to do? And in all four of these stories, what's the end result? What is shown? What is ultimately shown in all four of these stories? Faith and power. Yeah, Jesus' power. Yeah, you're right, Scott. Faith in the imploring of, "I need you, Jesus," and Jesus obliges by showing his power. There's a powerful miracle that's done in all four of these stories. I think it's just really, really neat, the fact, again, that Mark, in this anthology of stories about Jesus, true stories about Jesus, Mark decides to take these stories that all have multiple things in common and says, let's go and let's lump these all together so that as the reader is going through Mark 4 and 5, the reader's going, wait a minute, there's fear, there's entreating, there's the power of Jesus, there's failure on the part of the human to fix this problem. Whoa, boom, 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 boom. All these stories are all trying to tell you the same thing. Okay, they're all trying to tell you the same thing. And I think in the end, and we'll get to the specifics of them, so I don't want to make this a sermon. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, too, and you may be getting this, a lot of the cultures, if you look at Greek and Roman cultures, they had specific gods for specific things.
Yeah.
So if you look at these four stories, Jesus shows his power over nature, over mankind, over the spirit world.
The demons. Yeah, and death, yeah. And I think that, the fact that Jesus is coming in and saying, no matter what the problem is, I am the solution. You have a problem with the weather? Who is this that controls the wind and the waves and commands them to hush, be still? You have a demon in your life? Not just one, how about legion? We are a legion of demons. We're lots of demons. Demons so strong they can break chains, and guys run around naked in the graveyard all the time, cutting himself, mutilating himself, scaring everybody half to death. Jesus can fix the spirit problems also. You have a physical problem, an illness, a hemorrhage that no doctor can seem to fix. Jesus fixed that. And then finally, the culmination of it all, if he can control the weather and he can control the spirit world and he can even heal you of your ailments, what is the last thing that he shows? I can even conquer death. I can even conquer death. Now, the problem, of course, comes in the application. if I really, really pray and I want a snow day, I'm in grade school and I really want that snow day because I got that final, and I prayed to God, God, bring that weather. Listen, I know from Mark 4 that you control the weather. God, bring that snow day. I could really use that snow day. And what if God doesn't bring the snow day? Okay, on a more serious note, what about the demons in your life? But I don't mean the demons, as in the same kind of demons that we see here, because we've gone over this before. We don't need to go over it again. We've addressed it in previous classes. But maybe just proverbially speaking, the demons in your life, the stuff from your past, maybe that demon from your past still keeps creeping up. It just keeps coming up. It won't go away. That demon from your past is ruining your marriage. That demon from your past is keeping you from getting a job. That demon from your past is keeping you from getting an apartment. That demon from your past is, whatever it is, a label that gets put on you because of a demon from your past, and you just can't seem to escape it. And you pray to God. Does God? And this is not joking at all. I know it's a sensitive thing to say, but just like let's brass tacks here. That demon maybe is sex offender. And can you pray to God and say, God, just get me off that sex offender list, because this is really, really hard on me. It's making it impossible for me to move on with my life. It's making it impossible for me to have a home, to get into an apartment, to get a job. God, just take me off the sex offender list. Does God just miraculously go, there, record clear, totally expunged, you're great. And I also gave you an 800 credit score while I was at it. Does God just miraculously make the demons from your past just go away? What about illness? Are there illnesses that just don't go away? What about Paul? Paul's a great example. I had a thorn in the side and I prayed 3 times that it might go away. And what was God's answer to that? Nope. So even for someone like Paul didn't get everything he prayed for when it came to a thorn in the side, a physical ailment of some kind. And what about death? I can pray and pray and pray and pray, and eventually, inevitably, is my loved one going to die someday? All the prayer in the world doesn't make you live forever, at least physically here on earth as we are. So it's interesting that Jesus displays his power over things, and yet, in practical terms, it's almost like, well, where's my access to that? How come I don't get to have the access that they did in Mark 4 and 5? Let's explore that a little bit. How would you answer that? If somebody presented this sequence of events and said, well, that's all fine in a fantasy story. Oh, great. Jesus is basically Gandalf. I know it's a lot of Lord of the Rings references. I promise I'm not that nerdy, but I really am. But is the Gospel of Mark basically just saying that Jesus is Gandalf? And I don't really believe that Gandalf is going to come over the bend and save me from any orcs. I don't really believe that Gandalf can do magic in my life. Is Jesus basically just being presented as Gandalf, just kind of a mythical, legendary figure that doesn't actually do anything for me today? And how might you answer that when someone says, I prayed for the weather, and I prayed for my illness, and I prayed for my demons, and I prayed for God to defeat death, and none of those things happened for me, so that's why I don't believe in Jesus? How do you unravel that? Yeah, Jacob?
There's a lot of ways to tackle this, but Jesus does many amazing things. And when we read the Gospels, he does some miraculous things that are not going to happen today, but they served a purpose at that time. Mm-hmm. Jesus still does amazing things today for us, and we're told about what those things are. They're different than, calming a storm on a whim or raising someone from the dead. Yeah. He does amazing things such as he's an advocate for us. There's many things that Jesus still does today for us that are amazing, that aren't going to look like a miracle of the gospel.
Yeah, excuse me. I think that would be, if I was talking to someone, if I was at a coffee shop going through this conversation with someone who really felt that way, sorry about that, the first thread that I would pull to try and sort of unravel that is, okay, all right, so Jesus doesn't control the weather for you. There's a lot of people out there that are asking for different things from God. Well, for every person who wants the snow day, there's a lot of people who don't want the snow day. I'm the one praying that there aren't snow days. I don't want my kids to stay home. And I hate driving in snow. I'm not a winter guy. In case my lesson from last Sunday wasn't indication enough, I don't like winter. I don't do winter. Okay? I don't do winter. Period. So You have to understand that what God is showing is God is not necessarily laying down some pattern for pulling on the cosmic, vending machine lever, right? This is not a pattern to go, oh, so Jesus fixed the weather one time. That means he'll fix the weather for anybody, anytime, anywhere, whenever you ask him. Is that really the precedent that's being set here? And I think, Jacob, that's a very good observation you make is, like, that's not really the point behind this. It's not a precedent for whenever you want God to change the weather, well, look, he'll change the weather. It's, does God still do things for us that are maybe even better or bigger, more significant? I don't know who raised their hand first. I thought, Megan, maybe you had your hand up first.
I'll be quick. I was just going to say we respect God's power, but we also respect his discernment.
Great
I've
point.
learned more from the no's in my life than I have from God answering my prayers in the way that I asked him. And I think you resemble it to like a parent and their kid. They're going to ask for every candy under the sun. Does that mean that they should have it?
Yeah.
And I think God knows more than we know, and he shows us, like, I can do it.
Yeah.
But am I going to?
Yeah. And that's a very, very good observation. There's a divine discernment that is very powerful there. That, like, just because God can do something doesn't mean that's always what's best for us. I can give my kids piles and piles of candy. I can put more syrup on their waffle than any human being needs to consume. I can do that. I've got the syrup for it. But does that mean I do that for them? When my kids say, I want more syrup on there, do I say, I think that's enough syrup for now. I think that's enough. I've got enough syrup there. I can do it. But I also have enough wisdom and discernment to not do it. Rebecca?
So 2 things. Isaiah 55, first, the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So that's part of, that goes right along with what Megan was saying. We don't understand the big picture, even if we think we do. And often he is answering those prayers, and it's just not immediately apparent. And when you look back on things in hindsight, you can see much more clearly that things were answered, and it was better than what you thought it would be to begin with. And then secondly, you have to keep in context what these were about. These were miracles to show the people there present that this is the Son of God, and he is capable of doing all things, and confirming God's power through him.
Yeah.
Versus, seeing how he's your magical vending machine, and you can just get whatever you want out of him.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, I'm going to track one more thing here out of these stories, and then Dad, I'll let you make a comment. Ultimately, in each of these stories, yes, Jesus is concerned for their physical well-being. All things being equal, is God happy when we're sick and miserable? Of course he's not. Is God happy when we're scared of the weather? When you get a tornado warning and you're huddled up in your bathtub? Like, does God look at that and go, little ants down there scared of a tornado? It doesn't make God happy. He's not happy with our fear and our pain and our suffering. It doesn't make him happy. But ultimately, look at what he's trying to grow within us. Even through bad experiences, even when we are sick and in danger and in fear for our lives, look at what he's growing within us. In each of these stories, Jesus is encouraging the person in question, the person at the center of the story. He is encouraging and nurturing faith. Look at this again. In Mark chapter 4, verse 40, after calming the storm, he looks at his disciples with what I think is some disappointment in his voice. Why are you so timid? Why is it that you have no faith? Later on, in verse 19, when he's talking to the man who had the demons removed from him, I love this encouragement that he gives him. In verse 19 of chapter 5, he told them, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. Essentially what he's saying is, look what I've done to you. Now be bold in your faith and go share it with other people. Don't keep it, don't be that lamp under a basket, but go out and share it now. You've had an amazing thing happen to you. Your life's been given back to you. Your life has been changed forever. Now go and tell other people. That's the expression of our faith to others. Down in verse 34, he said to the woman, this is the woman with the hemorrhage, after she was healed, he says, daughter, your what? Your faith has made you well. He's nurturing that faith. He's saying, this is about your faith. This isn't about me. I can heal anything I want. I can snap my fingers, proverbially speaking. I can make the weather die down. I can bring people back from the dead. I can do anything that I want with the snap of a finger. But this story isn't about me snapping my finger and giving you what you want. This story is about you showing your faith. And it is your faith that made you well. And then, of course, he says to Jairus and his wife in verse 36, but Jesus, overhearing what was spoken, said to the synagogue official, do not be afraid any longer. Just believe. And so in each of these stories, it's not about the power of Jesus, although the power of Jesus is sort of the driving force in the story. It's really, these stories go even deeper. It is about nurturing and growing and displaying our faith in God. That's the bigger question, right? That's the bigger issue. God can create the universe by saying, let there be light, and suddenly there's light in all the universe. His power does not need any more defending. I look up at the stars, and I see the biggest things in the universe, and then I look at the ground, and I see the smallest things below my feet, and I know that God is a powerful God who can do anything and create anything and will destroy everything in the end as well. His power does not need any more defending. You know what needs defending? You know what needs growing? You know what needs proving? My faith is what needs to be proved. Yeah, Gina?
I was just wondering and reading, there were several times where he said, don't go share it.
Yes, he told that to Jairus at the end, is like, keep this under wraps.
But then again, he did say, in 18 through 20, go tell.
Yeah.
So, is that just individual situations?
Yes.
How they needed to be handled?
Yeah, like the man, like when Jesus healed the leper and he said, don't go tell anybody, but go to the priest and offer your sacrifice. I think in that case, it was, let's make sure that you follow all the rules, the regulations about cleanliness and holiness and everything. So in that case, it was, I need you to follow the proper procedures and follow the law. I think in the case of Jairus and his family, maybe there was the idea that because he was a synagogue official, that situationally, contextually, it would not have been quite the right time for someone like Jairus, a synagogue official, to start talking about his daughter coming back to life. Who knows what the ramifications might have been for Jairus personally, or for his influence in the community, or it might have just made it impossible for Jesus to go anywhere, because we know from other stories that when people do blab about him, what happens? He can't even go places. He can't even stop to eat. He can't take 5 minutes to eat a meal or go to a town and preach because people crowd around him too much. And then in the case of the man who was healed of the legion of demons, presumably, if that was the Decapolis, that means a Gentile. Maybe, I don't know. We don't really have a ton of information about it. But if that means a Gentile in the Decapolis, that might be just an opportunity where Jesus is trying to be like, hey, listen, let the word spread among the Gentiles. Like we don't need to worry about the law or priests or synagogues or Sabbath days or when it comes to Gentiles, like let's just light this fire and let it go. So it's situational. Dad, you had a comment.
Well, yeah, a couple of verses to Rebecca's second point, and you had talked about this as well. The Gospel of John, toward the end, I think John records 7 miracles of Jesus.
I think so.
I think it's 7.
Yeah.
Verse 30 of chapter 20, many are the signs therefore Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written that you may believe. Mm-hmm. And I think that gets to the faith. And then
he probably should have put a little spot at the end that says, and many more could have been written that Mark wrote about. So just go read Mark.
And there's probably more that Mark didn't write about.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so, Peter, in your sermon this morning, you referenced the sermon in Acts 10. We are witnesses, it says in verse 10 of 39, or 39 of chapter 10. We are witnesses of all the things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem. And then he goes on, verse 43, of him all the prophets bear witness that through his name everyone who believes in him would receive forgiveness of sins. So there's the prophecies witness of Jesus. The apostles were witnesses of many things that aren't recorded. But the point is so that they believe in Jesus.
Yes. The point is that, listen, God doesn't need to defend his power more than he has. What God needs is for you to grow your faith. That's really the challenge. God needs to grow your faith.
And if we didn't have faith, we're still lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Jennifer?
Well, yeah, on that note, when we talked about God maybe like not answering these prayers or like not demonstrating his power for us, we pray for like the weather to be changed, or if we pray for all, like healing from physical illness or whatever. God's ultimate goal for us, his ultimate plan, the way that he works all things together for the good of us, has really next to nothing to do with our physical life here on earth. That's never his ultimate goal. He's not trying to heal our physical body and preserve it for like long periods of time. The goal is to make us more and more like his son and make us more and more ready for eternity with him. All of his goals for us come down to like the spiritual goal, our growth in our faith, our growth in our righteousness. And so it's like James says, you ask and you don't receive because you're only asking for things for your pleasure, or really for your physical needs. And we're so blinded most of the time to our spiritual needs compared to like our awareness of our physical needs. Like we need shelter, and we need food, and we need water, and we need all those things to be safe and to be comfortable. But God's will for us is spiritual things. So we ask and we don't receive because our will is not aligned with his will being our spiritual ultimate good.
Yeah. I love that passage in James 4, right? You ask and you do not receive, and you get so frustrated by it because you're asking with wrong motive that you may spend it on your pleasures. Like, don't be surprised when you get frustrated in your prayers, when you're asking for things just because you want stuff. And I also love, you remind me of 1 Timothy 6, where he talks about people who go into their religion with the wrong kinds of motives. And he says in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 5, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain, right? Like, as if I'm godly enough, I'll gain something out of it. And I love his retort in verse 6 of 1 Timothy 6 is, but godliness actually is a means of great gain. It just has to be accompanied by contentment. Like, when you change your paradigm, right? Godliness is an incredibly, incredibly rich thing to attain to. It's just not rich in the way that you think that it's rich. It's a different kind of richness. And I like that retort. So, Jennifer, really good comment there also. And Rebecca, go ahead.
Our hardships today serve a purpose, too. They're a tool that God uses for us to deepen our relationship with him and to learn lessons. And it's also an opportunity for other people to step up and serve the way that God tells us he wants us to serve each other.
Yeah.
So our hardships have a purpose. And even though they're not fun to go through, we need to see them as opportunities for ourselves going through them, and for us to allow others to serve the way that God wants.
Well, it's like the rich young ruler in Matthew 19. What an opportunity. You ever think about what he turned down? And it's like, with all the best, I think he had good motives. I think he was a man who was genuinely seeking. So, well, what else? I mean, I've done all those laws. I've kept the commandments, but I just feel like there's one more thing, and the text says that Jesus loved this. He just felt love for him. He just really felt compassion for him, and he said, well, there is one thing. Go sell all your possessions, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. Wow, what an opportunity to be a disciple, a personal disciple of Jesus. And all you had to do to get that richness, to get that opportunity that all of us could just dream about, like just follow Jesus and listen to him and see him, and you turned it down because you had too much stuff. He went away grieving in his heart because he had too much stuff. A good comment. Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, to put it, we're saying they all draw for us to have this closer relationship, this closer faith in him, and put it on another earthly level, we think of, I've had this example before of like, if your kids come to you as an earthly parent during the storm, they want comfort. They feel that you can offer the peace, not because you're going to stop the storm. Like your kids run into your bedroom when there's a lightning and thunderstorm, not because they think by being with you, you're stopping the storm. Yeah. Just your presence gives them peace. Yeah. And that's the kind of relationship that God wants. I mean, he may not stop the storm, he can. Yeah. But his presence should give us peace in any of those scenarios, coming to him as our Father. Yeah. And it's like Jesus, when he calms the storm, I do think Jesus is a little frustrated with his disciples. Like verse 40 of chapter 4, I mean, it does, why are you so timid? Like, why are you so timid? How is it that you have no faith? Like, that's a really challenging question. Like, imagine if Jesus said that to me or to you. Like, how hard would that be if Jesus, like, put his arm around and said, Ryan, why do you have no faith? Why are you always so timid about things? Don't you believe in me? Don't you trust me? Don't you have faith in me? Why do you have so little faith right now? That's very challenging to us. Okay, we've got a little bit of time here. Let's take a look at these stories now. We may just get through the man with the demons. I imagine that's all we'll have time for. But I wanted to look at the big picture because I felt like there was a really neat lesson there that was being shown by Mark in doing this anthology of stories. But I wanted to look at the stories each in turn. We looked at the storm on Wednesday night, so we're done with that one. Let's go on to chapter 5, verses 1 through 19. They go to the other side of the sea of the country of the Gerasenes. This is in an area called the Decapolis, and I don't have a map with me, and if I could have gotten the TVs to work, I could have put a map up here for you. But we'll just do a very rudimentary map here. The Sea of Galilee is shaped a little bit like this. The Jordan River goes down this way toward the Dead Sea. Up here you have Capernaum and Bethsaida, which are very Jewish communities. You have the city of Tiberias right here, which is kind of like the Roman administrative capital of the area. And then over here you have what's called the Decapolis, okay? And the Decapolis is a collection, I won't do 10, you get the point. The Decapolis is a collection of 10 primarily Gentile cities on that side of the Sea of Galilee. And so what you have then is, this side is very Jewish. This side is very Roman, because that's where Tiberias is. And this side is very, like, let's just say, mutt Gentile. No racism intended. Okay? So, when Jesus comes over to the other side of the sea, he's leaving the Jewish side behind and going to a primarily Gentile side. And what's one really big indicator that probably a lot of Gentiles live on that side of the sea? A herd of pigs. You typically going to find a herd of pigs up in Bethsaida or Capernaum? Probably not many pigs up there. But the fact that there's just like people like raising pigs out there in the Decapolis, it just shows like that's a very Gentile area. His disciples are very wary of the Decapolis. His disciples are probably wondering, why are we crossing the sea and going over to this? I mean, it's like, look, we literally crossed the sea, and look, there's pigs waiting for us on the other side. This is not a good sign. It's not good. Jesus, not good. There's pigs, and there's a really creepy naked man in the graveyard. And so that is what they encounter when they come out of the boat. Immediately, look at verse 2. It says, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he had his dwelling among the tombs, and nobody was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, the shackles broken in pieces. No one was strong enough to subdue him. And constantly, night and day, among the tombs and in the mountains, he was crying out and gashing himself with stones. So the man is like mutilating himself and hanging out in graveyards and just like, you know, I mean, my imagination, I think, probably cannot comprehend just how creepy this whole thing must have been. And all joking aside, this is a man who is utterly tormented in his spiritual and physical state. He's mutilating himself. He's among graveyards. He's scaring everybody who comes by. And it says he's crying out and wailing and screaming. I mean, again, this is absolutely not a joke. I'm not making light of this at all. But
when you spend time in Memphis, downtown Memphis, if you've ever been to New York, we've been to New York, if you've ever been to Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, whatever, any big city where you're going to have a lot of homeless people and a lot of people with mental health disorders that are not being treated, have you seen like legitimately creepy, scary things from homeless people where you are not sure, like you see someone on the subway and you go, I think we're just going to wait 9 minutes for the next train. We're just going to wait. I'm not getting on that subway with that person. What's that?
The next train has one too.
Yeah, the next train doesn't have one. The next train will have 3 of them, right? But that is what this is. This is a man who the local townsfolk have done everything. They're like chain him up and just bind him and just get him under control, which is unfortunately, again, joking aside, that unfortunately is what we tend to want to just do with homeless people with mental health problems. Is just chain him up and put him somewhere. Just get him off the street and put him somewhere out of sight, out of mind. Did that work with this guy? Nope. He breaks chains. He rips shackles apart and he escapes. And so this is something that nobody can fix. There is no power of man that can subdue this person. And it says in verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, what do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. It's amazing the impact that Jesus has. Just by stepping onto dry land from the boat, the impact that Jesus has spiritually. Jesus is, you realize that there's a physical realm that we can see and touch, right? We have a physical realm that surrounds us. You realize there is an unseen spiritual realm, right? There is a dimension of spiritual activity that's going on all around us. And I don't want to be weird about it or anything, angels and demons and that. Like, it's a spiritual dimension that we can't really fully comprehend. And so I don't try to comprehend it, and I don't try to define it. But there is a spiritual war going on. Ephesians chapter 6 says that our warfare, when he talks about putting the weapons of our warfare on, the armor of God, he says we're fighting against like spiritual forces and the powers of darkness. We're fighting a spiritual war against spiritual beings. When Jesus enters any spiritual environment, he is immediately the apex predator in that environment. He immediately impacts the spiritual environment around them. Jesus is like going to a pond here. You just got a pond, it's got some sunfish and bass in it, and you immediately just throw a gigantic alligator snapping turtle in there. Does that alligator snapping turtle immediately impact the environment around him? Absolutely. He is a Burmese python down there in the Everglades, okay? And so he just steps off the boat, and this legion just completely freaks out. He's like, does not even know what to do with himself except to just run over and bow down and say, please don't torment me. Please don't torment me. Because he knows that Jesus is the apex spiritual predator there. He is the keystone species in any environment that he walks into. And I think that it's such a powerful display. Okay, so what do you make of his response? So, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And then in verse 9 he says, what is your name? Why? We can only speculate. Just why do you think Jesus wants to know the name? Is he asking for the name of the demon? Maybe is he asking for the name of the demon possessed? What do you think is going on here? And again, we can only speculate.
Power in knowing names.
There's power in knowing names. That's what Rebecca said. Like, there's maybe if you're trying to influence or overpower something, there's something to be said about having knowledge. If you're going to go into a negotiation with someone, isn't it nice to know in that negotiation, like, where are they coming from? Who am I negotiating with? If you're going into a court, right, I want to know who the other lawyer is. I got to know who the other lawyer is. I want to know who my accuser is. In a negotiation, I want to know where are you coming from in this negotiation? Maybe here's Jesus immediately overpowering this demon, but also wanting to know, like, okay, what am I working with here with this demon?
You're right, but Jesus already knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, it could be. Theoretically, he already knows the answer to that question, and this is for the benefit of those witnessing. It's so that his disciples, could Jesus have snapped his finger and just made all of it go away immediately? Of course he could. But instead, for the sake of his disciples, he says, hey, I want everybody to know, how many demons are in you right now? Oh, it's lots of demons. There's like a whole legion. Like a whole legion of demons. Thousands of us. You guys heard that, right? Everybody heard. For the record, everybody heard. We are dealing not with one, but with a legion of demons. So what I'm about to do, so everybody's clear, everybody knows the power that's about to be on display here. And when he makes them go away, he casts them into the pigs. Okay, now we're running out of time. I know this is a weird thing. It's a very weird story. So he allows, in fact, in verse 13 it says he suffers them, which I think gives, the correct connotation here. He suffers the demons to enter into this herd of pigs, and immediately the pigs, in their sudden insanity, race off of a steep bank into the water and drown themselves in the Sea of Galilee. That's really weird. What do you make of it? How do you make sense of this very, very weird story?
When it says ran violently down.
Yeah.
It's like freaking people out.
Yeah. Okay, it's another Lord of the Rings reference. You remember when Denethor is on fire at the end of Return of the King, right? He's on fire and he's going absolutely nuts. And what does he do? He runs violently and crazily off the cliff. You know, like, open your eyes! And he runs off the cliff and everything. Okay.
Also ruined cherry tomatoes for everybody.
Also absolutely ruined cherry tomatoes for everybody.
Should I bring some videos?
With the elders' permission, one Sunday we'll just have a Lord of the Rings marathon. How about that? I don't think I'm going to get permission for that. But, yeah, they ran violently. So, what do you make of it then? First of all, did Jesus commit property crime here? How do you answer? Because that is a question that someone will ask, is like, these are not his pigs to destroy, so did Jesus commit property crime?
I've actually seen an atheist make that point in the debate.
Oh yeah, I've seen it also, absolutely. And on that, that's where your cliffhanger is going to be. Yes, Jeff.
In New American Standard says Jesus gave them permission. So
Yeah.
He's not the one that told them to go. He's not the one that put them there. He just allowed them to do it.
Yeah, I think that to me is the most satisfactory answer is Jesus allowed them, he suffered them, he permitted them, but it's not like Jesus told them, go into those pigs and then kill all the pigs. He said, listen, you can leave the man, you can have pigs. That's what you can have. I'll let you have access to pigs, but you will stop tormenting this man. It also, I think, goes to show the level of inhumanity that the townspeople had. The fact that there is this neighbor of theirs who's now healed of a legion of demons, and what are they worried about? The pigs got killed. To them, the pigs being killed was enough for them to say, just get out of town, Jesus. This is too weird. We can't handle it. Well, listen, your neighbor, a human being, a flesh and blood human being, just got his life back, and you're worried about pigs. I think it kind of goes to show what the priorities were of those people in the Decapolis. All right, we'll pick up there. We'll finish that up, and we'll look at these next few stories when we get together on Wednesday night. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, Legion, exactly. Well, how y'all doing? Good. I'm doing very well. Alan, how are you today? Good handshake. Good to see you.
I'm only taking and I went down and they prescribed me a step up from what they prescribed last time. So I